Welcome back to another episode of A Place Where I Belong Ministries, the ministry that is all about getting you connected into the body of Christ. I'm your host, Pastor Jeff, and I'm so glad you tuned in today because we have an amazing show for you. We are continuing the Odd Man Out series. This topic, we're going to talk about what has been on my mind for quite some time, actually, and this episode is kind of near and dear to my heart because it is something that I was really struggling with for a long time when it comes to being able to really get connected into the body of Christ. And I remember there was a point in time where I was going to service, and I basically overheard a conversation between two ladies, and each of them were complimenting one another, and eventually one of them said something that it's a common phrase, we hear it all the time. She said, "It looks like we both showed up in our Sunday best." And later on in the service, just as praise and worship was starting, these two guys come walking into the sanctuary, and they were construction workers. And I don't know if they just got off work, but they were decked out in their full construction gear. They were wearing their ripped and torn jeans, but not in the fashion trendy way. They were wearing their construction steel-toe boots, the ones that are just massive. They even had their reflective gear on, and they were just covered in like dust and dirt. I mean, it literally looked like they just got off work, and it kind of got me thinking. What is it really? Is it wear your Sunday best when you come to church, or is it come as you are? Mm-hmm. And now some of us could ultimately make the case of the fact that maybe it's both. That maybe come as you. Maybe come as you are is more of a condition in that sense, right? Or they could even say that wearing our Sunday best is really more of just wanting to honor God. And I'm pretty sure there are people out there who could probably find Bible verses that will actually adhere to that. Or there are probably some people who can even make Bible verses fit to kind of bring this about, and to honestly say that maybe coming as you are doesn't necessarily mean clothes purposes or how we necessarily look, but maybe it's just more the condition of the heart, which I can fully understand in that sense. But what we want to look at today is within this episode is to kind of get down to the root of it. I mean, if what's the point of us coming to church looking our Sunday best if we're broken inside? What's the point of us trying to look good when truth of the matter is that we need God to really kind of show up and do something in service. Some people show up to service, and to be honest with you, they come in their suits, but in their minds they're like, God, this is it. This is my last chance. If you don't move here today, if you don't do something in my life today, if you don't give me a word that's going to help me or encourage me, then I'm gone. I'm done with this. And that really got me thinking about the state of the church, and it kind of brought up the question within my mind: are we changing the meaning of church? And so that's what we really want to look at here today. And as always, I have a guest on the show, and I'm super excited about the guest here today. He's probably one of the coolest guys that I know. He's highly intelligent, fashion forward, super creative. And to boot, he's actually a really good-looking guy.
Wow,
I'm okay with. I'm okay with my sexuality to say guys are pretty good-looking. So our guest here today is Emmanuel. He also goes by the stage name E.
Right.
So super excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem, man. I wanted you on this episode in particular because I know in the past you and I have had conversations before, and it's always fun when you and I talk and we get down into what the church is really all about. And I love the fact that I'm a little bit more radical thinking when it comes to church. I can sometimes have some pretty far out ideas.
Always.
And sometimes it's I got to take a step back and be like, okay, maybe the church just isn't ready for this yet. We'll put that on the back burner and we'll see how this goes. But essentially, what I wanted to really get into though is that I've ultimately always loved the type of knowledge and the insight that which you have to bring. Now this show just isn't about wearing your Sunday best issue. Obviously, it goes a lot deeper than that, and but I really did feel like I needed to make a point in where this show is where this show is ultimately going to go. And that point is that how much of the worldly views or worldly ideas are we allowing into the body of Christ? There was a moment in the mid 1990s, and I'm sure that a lot of people aren't probably going to remember this, but in the mid 1990s there was this really big movement where a lot of churches were trying to figure out how do we get more people to come into our church, and this is where a lot of the bigger worship movements started coming into play. A lot of these worship bands and churches that are known for their worship, right? This is where they actually became popular. A lot of people don't, they really started getting moving, and a lot of people don't really know it. Like, for example, places like Hillsong United, right? One of their first albums came out in the mid to late 1990s, and it started a real big movement. Now, the ultimate idea of this movement was that the best way we can get people to come into the church is to actually make it not look like church, to not make it feel like church.
Yeah.
And it was something very dynamic, something very revolutionary in that, people come in and they're expecting, hymnals, and they're expecting very slow worship, and they're not expecting a stage or flashy lights or smoke and, very up-tempo, very modern type music. And I'm actually perfectly fine with all of this, but it's getting to the point where are we now beginning to allow a lot of that worldly ideas and worldly views to actually really impact the church today? And so that's what we actually really, really want to focus on. And I brought you in because, we want to take this from two different angles. You and I are polar opposites when it comes to the church because, unlike myself, I don't have a whole lot of roots within the church. I came just by myself, no family, not a whole lot of friends, but you're kind of the opposite. So just so the audience can get to know you a little bit more here, I just want to ask you, so how long have you been attending the All Nations?
I've been at that church since I was born. I was literally born. I was probably born in the sanctuary.
So you're one of those people who was literally born and raised within the church?
Yeah.
Okay.
My parents brought me there. As long as I can remember, I've been there.
So you've been in this church for a very long time, and I've kind of seen this go two ways. I find that people who are in the church, born and raised in the church, they kind of they either feel like this need to get out of the church and create their own life, and even if it means not having a strong relationship with Christ. And then there are also those who rise above and are able to really tap into Christ. And you are obviously one of those people. You've been working in the church for a little bit. So how long have you even been serving now?
Serving, I guess it depends on what you mean by serving. I got involved in ministry. I think I was in high school. I'm 24 now, so I was in maybe grade 9, 8 or 9 maybe. I got involved in the videography and photography, and so when I was younger, I just thought it was cool. So I was like, I want to get involved in that, and so.
But you're also now a youth leader,
right?
Correct? And right. So how long have you been a youth leader now?
I think it was 2014.
Okay.
That it was Pastor Phil.
Yeah.
He was leading the youth ministry at that time, and I'm pretty sure that's when I got involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about 5 years now. 5 years now.
That's
okay.
crazy.
How much family do you even have in this church?
Biological family is really small. It's just my immediate family, so that's my sister and my parents.
Okay, so you don't have it. So biologically, you don't have any aunties or uncles.
None,
just
but
spiritually, auntie and uncles, right?
Spiritually, culturally, I think a lot of people have aunties and uncles that I don't even know their names. I couldn't even tell you their relationship with my parents, but But in terms of church family, it's pretty deep. Family, friends, dating back to when I was young, as long as I can remember, I've got people that I consider family, and that spans about 10, 15 families. Not 10, 15 people, 10, 15 families. So
quite a bit then.
Yeah.
Basically, when I was first showing up, I didn't look the part.
Okay.
I remember there was a point in time where I was growing out my hair.
The cultural differences.
I had earrings. and stuff like that. And so I was definitely not looking the part, so to speak. And you know, it's funny because I could pretty much come to church however I wanted to, right? I'm driving myself to church now.
Yeah.
For you, was that different?
You couldn't even show up to church without brushing your hair
Mm-hmm.
or combing your hair because, at least to my knowledge, it's a reflection on them that they don't take care of you or they haven't taught you to take care of yourself. You know what I mean? So
Gotcha.
it's you come looking proper, quote unquote proper, to make sure that you're a good representation of your parents, you know? And once that's instilled with you from young, it's kind of hard to try
Just
and
let it go.
deviate, you
Just,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I get it. Okay, in your opinion, do you think we should still be coming in our Sunday best, or do you think we should be coming as we are?
I think it's kind of like what you said before, that I think come as you are refers more to your heart posture.
The condition
Yeah.
in which you're in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think arguments can be made for both, right? Realistically, though, I think you come as you want to. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where I think it's to your own conviction. You know, come as you want to. And we're not gonna get into all the like, oh, if this is allowed and that is allowed, because I think that's cultural and it's subjective and it's like it varies from denomination. You know, so. But what I would say for coming as you are and Sunday's best, I dress the way I dress for my own personal reasons. You know what I mean? So if I come in a suit or if I come in a T-shirt, I always make sure that I come clean in my eyes. You know what I mean? That's how I show my respect to God, that I'm not showing up anyhow. You know what I mean? And that's I think that's partially cultural as well, because to some people it doesn't matter what they're wearing, and to them, if they came in like an undershirt and dirty boxers, they still feel as pure can be, you know. So
because I mean there is a lot more modern style churches in the U.S., for example, nowadays, where pastors will literally just show up in jeans and a T-shirt. It's almost like Apple's launch party where you got the CEO of the company wearing jeans and a turtleneck, right? And it's in a way it's kind of like we're doing away with, we don't need to be in a suit, but at the same time though, this is how you were brought up, this is how you were raised, right? But what about those people who don't have nice clothes? And the truth of the matter is we have some people in our church who I mean, you could tell they come in what is their best clothes, but maybe for certain people that's what they wear on an off day. Right. So I mean, how do we ultimately get to this point where we make these people who don't have these nice clothes? What do they do?
Right.
What do they do?
This is one of the things where I think community and your heart posture is so crucial, because if you walk into a room and you're the only person that stands out for some reason, whether it's you don't have expensive clothes, or whether you're not as tall as everyone else, or you're not as elegantly speaking as, like, you know what I mean? When you're surrounded by people that care about you and they don't make you feel less than because of what you don't have, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And I think that comes down to the church community, and of course the individual, but I think that's more related to the people than what they actually have.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, and be truthful, be honest, okay?
Of course.
How do you think the members of the church, let's say if some guy, let's say your age, shows up to church wearing a suit but smells like weed, how do the people embrace him? I'm not talking about the leaders, I'm talking about the people. Because let's face it, I mean, there's a lot more people than there are leaders within the church. There's a lot more people than there are pastors within the church. And so the thing is that I hate to break it to you, but that warming heart of one person can be overwhelmed by the many judgmental eyes.
Right.
So I mean, realistically, from what you've seen and what you've been going through and growing up within church, do you think that person is like being looked at, maybe being judged a little?
I like the way you put that. I really like the way you put that. It balances out both sides, and honestly speaking, like truthfully speaking, from what I've seen, our church specifically, like because that's what I can speak on, has gotten so much better.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
at the-
absolutely. Over the years,
like,
over
we've
the
gotten
years, for
so
sure,
much
for
better.
sure.
Is we're all people, you know. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just people getting better.
Mhm.
And I think maybe 5 years ago,
Might have been a different.
there was a
story.
lot more judgment on first sight that would you generally see,
Mhm.
you know. And I think now, shout out to what everyone in the leadership, what you guys are doing with Connect. It's a much more welcoming environment to someone who's unchurched.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I think that's a blessing to have, because that's the reason we have church, you know.
Yeah.
So
You know, we could focus on our church and we could talk our church up.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I mean, this show isn't just about our church; it's about the body of Christ.
exactly.
And so, I mean, do you think that we as a church, okay, are embracing every member as Christ would?
Nah. No, I think it's
And
very
I mean,
easy to say no.
I mean, outside of our church, have you seen it maybe in another church? Because I know you
course.
performed in other churches and whatnot,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, I went to a church.
we don't have to name names.
Yeah,
We
no,
don't
of
have to
course
name
not.
names.
I went to a church to minister a spoken word,
Mhm.
a couple of spoken word pieces,
Okay.
and one gentleman was sent home because the pastor said that rap music is demonic. Like,
Gotcha.
yeah, like for the guy to minister his like Bible scriptures through a rhythmic
Mhm.
speech on a beat, like he said, like that's demonic. And it was eye opening for me because I didn't think that could still happen. That happened 2017, and so like
So it's still something current, still an
Yeah.
issue today that
yeah,
and that goes back to the fact that, you know, obviously this pastor is not he's obviously, he or she is ultimately allowing culture to supersede biblical principle
hey,
in,
I can't even.
in the sense, but
I'm not a pastor, so I'm not even. I'm not gonna. That's not my jurisdiction to say it. I'm just the reason I bring it up is to say that I know as the church we have some views that are kind of not up for debate. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That
Mhm.
some things that I think there is room to discuss.
Yeah.
I think some people don't give
want
that
it,
room. Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
you know, I remember there was a buddy of mine, and this was years and years and years back, and you know, this was obviously at that stage where I feel like in Canada we're usually a couple of steps behind when what's trending in the U.S. and what's happening
Yeah.
over there. And so at the time, you know, this movement of really just come as you are, pastors up there in a t-shirt and jeans,
The whole
on
contemporary
Sunday morning, yeah,
movement.
you know, it was something that was very kicking off and alive and well in the U.S., but here in Canada, still not so much. And you know, I remember having a conversation with him, and I brought him out to church a couple of times, but he ultimately told me, he said, "Look, I don't want to come anymore." And I said, "Why?" And he turned to me and he was just like, "Because what I'm wearing right now are the best clothes that I have, and I feel like I feel embarrassed." Coming to church because everyone's wearing suits, they look great, they look well, even to the point where like the only services he would even be willing to go to was something like a youth service or something like that, where the dress code isn't so strict, even
Right.
though some churches, you know,
Yeah.
even in the youth service they're like
You
come
better
in
come.
suits, come wearing your Sunday best, you know, type
Right.
deal. So I mean, it made me feel bad because I mean,
Of course.
how are we helping these people who feel this way? Because he didn't have the money to buy a suit, he didn't have money to buy clothes, you know, and some of these people are actually really trapped in their vices, whether it be drug addiction, alcohol addiction, that half or more than half of their paycheck goes to those things, right? So in some cases it's not even that they don't have the money to buy clothes, but they're just spending it on other things. And it you know, it breaks my heart because it's almost like, are we getting to that point where the qualification to even enter a church building is to look your best? You know, and if you don't look your best, you're going to get eyes on you, you're going to have people talk about you. And ultimately, I mean, there are members who are going to make people feel that way. And I don't necessarily look at them and be like, man, these members need to get saved. These members need Jesus. We're all a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
We all have certain issues that we need to deal with. And
Right.
unfortunately, some of these issues, people just, need to deal with that judgmental condemnation side of them that they have going on. And it ultimately breaks my heart, but it kind of gets me to the point where, with this guy, let's say he toughed it out and he decided he was going to come to church anyways. How well do you think he would be received by people? And do you think someone, let's say, for example, like him in his position, in his condition, would he be embraced by members? Would he be able to, even, let's say if he wanted to join a ministry, would how attractive would he be to people?
Yeah.
Do you think you think he would have kind of like this stigma against him where he's not able to
Like be received?
connect into the church because people are going to be resistant against him?
I think it comes down to teaching and execution on both sides, meaning being the body of the church and the individual.
Yeah.
Like, once you teach the members and the leaders and the church in general, once you teach the church that this is how your behavior comes off, like some of them genuinely don't know. Like I have aunts and uncles who will literally walk up and say like, "Oh, what's wrong with your hair?"
They'll say
like
just anything that comes out of
like
their
they'll
mouth,
say,
and
"What's
it's just,
wrong with your hair?"
You can't say that.
And
here.
they see no issues with that. Like, it's, you have to help people become aware of the impact that their actions and their words have.
Yeah.
And then those people have to now make a change, you know? And then at the same time, the individual, we as the church and then the leaders also have that obligation to teach them, to say like,
Okay.
hey, like, it's okay to, to communicate. It's okay to reach a little bit out of your comfort zone and say hi to someone, I know it's difficult. Of course, it's difficult.
Absolutely.
I think that's also important because when you find yourself in a corner and not getting involved, when you put yourself in a corner, it's going to take a little bit more for someone to leave their group to pull you out of the corner.
Yeah.
Whereas if you came into the group and said, hey, my name is this, I know it's difficult to do that. I think it's harder for someone to say, ew, whatever you are, go into this corner.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been guilty of this, because every church has certain individuals that are very difficult to deal with.
Everywhere. Not even just every church, every job, every school, everywhere.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Even jobs and whatnot, we see it all the time. And it's just certain individuals, you see them and you instantly go the other way. And it's not necessarily how they dress or how they smell or how they look. It's just even their character, right? But at the same time, though, I mean, we need to definitely help out and touch these individuals,
100%,
and really kind of get them to a place. But it kind of gets me thinking, is church becoming a popularity contest even?
It's a good question.
Where everything needs to be attractive, everything needs to be put in this nice package, and if it's not in this nice package, then we don't want it. Right? It's like, it's kind of almost like buying like a new pair of Jordans, and it's like you bought this crazy expensive pair of Jordans. Let's say it's a limited edition, and you kind of like show up in a nice box. I want to see some gold wrapping when I open up this box. I want to see some reflective, I want to see something that reflects what I paid. Yeah. It's almost like we're getting to the point where we don't even really care much as to what's in the box. We just want the box to look good. And I see a lot of pastors and a lot of messages and what's being preached on YouTube and what you see in books and everything else. And you kind of, I'm not seeing a lot of messages of pastors speaking to the congregation saying, look, we need to get to a place where we're making people feel welcome. And so it kind of got me thinking, is church becoming more of a popularity contest to the point where we're going to be attracted to certain people and we're going to cling to those certain people, and maybe we're going to leave those who are not as attractive off to the side.
Right. Yeah, that's it's one of those sticky
Am I putting you in a
situations.
tough spot?
Nah, it's like those are one of those things that are the harsh reality of like the life we live, you know. And I think as people, they're just because it's our day and age, you know. We're
That's-
so visually like things have to be visually appealing because we're spoiled.
Yeah.
So many things are so good now, so we don't appreciate the time or the effort or the substance behind them because any and everything can look good.
Yeah.
Like a really garbage man, how do I say this and not be offensive? Someone who
Okay. Well, sometimes you just got to be
someone
offensive, man.
whose talent you may not appreciate.
Yeah.
Let's say a rapper that I may think is using nursery rhymes on a beat and shouldn't be looked at as a lyrical genius.
yeah.
Like the package that they're put in
Yeah.
and pushed out,
Absolutely.
it's like, oh, it's great. And so I think we have
And then
been
you have like
spoiled.
SoundCloud rappers who actually got some
no,
lyrical
who have
talent.
some real talent
Yeah,
and some
absolutely.
real skill, who but their package isn't as nice,
Yeah.
and so we miss the content. You know, so I think that's just the society we live in. Like, visually appealing wins.
And it's interesting that you say that. So I want us to turn to our first Bible verse here, and I want us to look at something because it's amazing how the Bible can really speak to us in current generations. And so we're going to look at Luke chapter 19, and you know, those who've been going to church for some time, you definitely know this passage. So we're going to kick it off from verse 1, and it says, "Then Jesus entered and passed through Jericho. Now behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was of short stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him, and said to him, 'Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must stay at your house.' So he made haste, came down, and received him joyfully. But when they saw it," in other words, the people, "when they saw it, they all complained, saying, 'He has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner.'"
Right.
So here you have a person who's unpopular, right? At the time, people hated tax collectors, and the reason why they hated them
Still
is,
hate
you know,
tax collectors.
I mean, yeah, still today we don't like tax collectors, right? I mean, I'm not even going to say, because it's almost to the point where you can't even say the company's name, because they might actually
Come
hear
and
this.
pocket check you, right?
I mean, I got a certain letter from the government, from a certain division of the government, this year, that said that I owed them money back from 2003. It was an oversight on their part. They didn't see it, but they just wanted to let me know, hey, we're going to garnish this from your tax return this year. And I'm like, really? 2003? There's no way. If I decided to forget to claim something,
Yeah.
I can't go back and claim it. But now all of a sudden, 2003, like it was absolutely absurd. And so, I mean, tax collectors in general are not loved. But in the time in which we're talking about here in Luke chapter 19, a large reason why the tax collectors were not liked was because their fancy living or their rich lifestyle was actually more taken from the people, because even though, for example, they would come up and say, you owe me $20 in taxes, and that would actually be legit as far as taxes go, they would actually come up to the people and say, you owe me $50 for taxes,
Yeah.
and pocket the 30, take the 20 back to the government.
Right.
And this is why people really, really disliked tax collectors. But it kind of got me thinking. Now, I even did a sermon on Zacchaeus, and I studied it a little bit, and I realized something is that, the Bible makes mention that he was short in stature. And I find it funny because the Bible usually doesn't really kind of just throw stuff in there to not really kind of give it meaning or content, And it got me thinking that maybe Zacchaeus was this type of person who was rejected by society, and sometimes these people who are rejected by society go into a way of life that is not so very popular of society, but it's a means to an end to get their own, right? It's their ability. Like, look, if you people don't like me, then that's fine. I'm gonna do me. I'm gonna go out and take care of me, and if that means I got to take your money, I'm taking your money. And so it got me thinking that this is an unpopular character, unpopular guy who was short in stature. The people probably didn't care much for him, even just by looks alone. Forget the fact that he's a tax collector, but even just by looks alone, right? They didn't really care for him. And so it ultimately got me thinking, are we more worried about being socially acceptable than our relationship with Christ? Finally we have Zacchaeus, right? Who was someone who was short in stature, profession was hated, but catch this, the people didn't care for him. The people did not like him. Right. And in fact, it got to the point where you have this wonderful man in Jesus Christ, a great teacher, a man who so many people were thinking is a prophet at this point in time, and was performing miracles, healing people, helping people out, but they were quick to judge even him when he was sitting with Zacchaeus. And obviously was just like, how could he possibly sit with this sinner? So Zacchaeus was definitely not loved by the people, but in his profession, the only friends that he probably would have had were other tax collectors. In other words, other tax collectors who didn't care about people. They probably didn't even care about each other. But the fact that, they were probably the only people they could really reach out to and talk to, it was pretty much all that they had, right? Yeah. But by Zacchaeus ultimately now doing what he did, if you read down further past verse 8, Zacchaeus then ultimately comes out and begins to tell Jesus Christ, look, I'm going to give half of my belongings to the poor, and everything that which I took from people that I should not have taken to people, I'm going to give it back to them. And so by doing this, he's shunning his profession. He's now to actually going in and the one crowd that which he fit into, he's taking himself out of. He's actually putting him in a place where now he's going to be rejected probably by both people. Because here's the thing, just because he starts giving stuff back to the poor and he's giving people back their money, it
doesn't mean we're all good.
It doesn't mean we're all good. Sometimes people will come to you, they'll apologize to you and say that you're so sorry. And the thing is that even though people be like, okay, fine, they're still going to walk away bitter. Right? That's just human nature and how we are, or at least how we can be sometimes. But so he's now shunning away two sides, right? He's shunning away the one side that which would even possibly like him, all for the sake of salvation,
right?
All for the sake of showing, I need you, Jesus. And so, are we getting to the point where we would rather be socially accepted, right? Would we rather put on this facade and this show to kind of let people know that, hey, I'm someone who's worthwhile to get to know, rather than kind of just being who we really are and allowing Christ into our heart?
It's a conversation everyone has to have with themselves, like we all have our own struggles, and I think pride is one of those things that
absolutely 100%.
Can really separate you from people. I think pride and greed, and I think greed is just a different form of pride, because you just think that you deserve or you should have something more than other people, which is pride. And so I think pride is really what severs relationships. And if you don't check yourself or ask God to show you where those issues are inside of you, you're not going to succeed in this area.
No, for sure.
You're not gonna be able to seek God instead of people.
Oh.
Because pride can make you seek people,
right?
Because you want approval, or you want
or just
glory. You want you want to. There's just, when you're not seeking the kingdom, the pride of life is like the next option.
Absolutely. So the big three, right?
Yeah.
The big three: the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, and then ultimately the pride of life,
right?
Which keeps us in sin, keeps us in bondage, keeps us from exposing who we really are as Christians, and this was something, me personally, growing up as a young leader, I was surrounded by really, really great leadership, right? The people who were technically my peers, right?
Right.
I looked at them like pillars of faith, the way they prayed, the way they studied the Bible, the way they kept their life. I always felt like I was 2 or 3 steps behind, and I didn't want to come out and tell anyone this. And I was almost like suffering in silence, even as a young leader, right? Ministry. I'm in charge of ministries. I got people under me, and I'm afraid to kind of come out and say, I need help.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I need help. And it's not until you break down that wall and get into the unknown, which is scary, right? Because let's face it, right? I mean, as Christians, we're afraid, one, we're going to get shunned. We're afraid we're going to be, looked as outcasts. People are going to start gossiping about what it is we're going through. All our dirty laundry has been aired, right? Especially in, like, for example, hey, look, I could go to a pastor or I could go to a leader. And, for someone like myself who doesn't have a whole lot of roots in the church, it might be a little bit easier. Right. But someone like you, on the other hand, right? Now, let's say you have a little bit more biological aunties and uncles. Yeah. Right? And I find that some, in the African culture, some of these aunties and uncles, they can just be very plain. They don't care. They'll say whatever's on their mind. And so you kind of open up to a leader or to a pastor in the church, and they have ties with your family. Somehow this stuff gets leaked, and now suddenly the whole family knows, and suddenly everyone's talking.
And you got a wildfire going on.
Exactly. So, and these are the thoughts and fears that which go into our mind, in which people are so desperately struggling. And it's like we have to wear this exterior that shows that we're good, not just in life, but as Christians as well, that we're not sinning, and I you can, as a pastor, you see people who talk to people talk to you. They tell you their sins. They tell you what's going on in their life and whatnot. And during a service or a sermon, and the pastor's like, raise your hand if you're struggling through this. I just want to pray with you. All eyes closed, no one look. Try to get the setting at least. Like just come out of your shell just a little to say I'm struggling. Yeah. And you could tell that like these people aren't raising their hands because they don't want anyone to know what they're dealing with. They don't want anyone to know what they're struggling with. And it just, are we ultimately getting to the place where we're more concerned about fitting in and looking the part rather than our salvation? All right, so unfortunately our time is getting way too spent here, so we kind of have to cut this off, but we're going to continue it off in the next episode. So we're going to take this to a part 2. So we just want to thank everyone for joining in. Please stay tuned for next week. We're going to continue on in this conversation. There's still a lot more that you and I got to talk about, a lot more that you and I got to discuss, because we need to hammer out these issues. And we're ultimately going to hammer back into the real meaning of this message. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank everyone for watching. We're super excited about the next part of this episode, so please tune in. You're not going to regret it. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be wonderful. Thank you for watching A Place Where I Belong YouTube channel. If you enjoyed the video, then hit that like button. And if you'd like to be notified of any future videos, then subscribe to our channel. If you want to contact us, you can follow the links below. Until then, thank you for watching. God bless you and stay safe.